Every time I wanted to quit, I just decided I would quit tomorrow. And then I never let tomorrow come.
I
And I
think.
have to credit a friend of mine who went to West Point with that mindset and that mentality of, just keep moving the carrot. And if
Mm.
it's too hard to get all the way through the day, then you get from breakfast to lunch and from lunch to dinner.
Hello, everyone. Today I have a very special guest on the podcast, Tracy McDonald. Welcome, Tracy, to the show. Please introduce yourself for our audience.
Good afternoon, Chitra. It's my pleasure to be here on the Warrior Mindset. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and your listeners. I'm Tracy McDonald, currently talking to you from Arlington, Virginia.
Beautiful. Oh, I can't wait to dig into your story because I know you have a fascinating one. So tell me before we get into it, when you think of the warrior mindset or just mindset in general, what comes to mind?
I think an image of a goddess, all women, regardless of what they're doing, what phase they are in their lives, there is an inner goddess in all of us.
Yes, yes, I love it. And do you see that in yourself as well? Do you see that warrior mode on in yourself? Do you feel like you've struggled with it, or has it always been there?
I think it's always there in the background, but occasionally life gets so busy and loud, you have to really stop and tap back into it, especially in challenging moments, and remember
Mm,
all of the things that you've already done and you've had those warrior moments, but just recalling them and using them to rebuild your self confidence.
yeah, so important, right? And I think that's great. What you touched upon is that it's always been there for all of us, right? It's always in there. Both of those voices, I call them the witch and the warrior, and they're always in there. And we're constantly like, okay, who's going to show up today? Who's going to be on the forefront today?
Yes.
That's yeah, so well said. So tell me a little bit about your story. I know you have multiple stories, and I urge everyone to follow you and learn more about the work you do. But tell me a little bit about your experience around being a Secret Service agent, because I know that's one thing we talked about.
Yes. I think it was one of the pinnacle times in my early career out of college where I really had to overcome fear to do something that I really desired. And just learning to tap into a mindset of tuning everything out. Because as the petite female going for a job that at the time was only 10% women, all my friends, all my family, come from the South, was raised in a very conservative home, encouraging. My parents were always encouraging, but it was not something that was um, conformist
Mm,
as a young woman from the South to decide to go from college to into a career in banking to transition into law enforcement. So there was a lot of like, oh gosh, well, what happened to her? She used to be, such a young lady, and now she's carrying a gun. And it was, a lot of people said she's going to get beaten to a pulp in training, which I did on some days. But it was just
wow.
the constant mindset of, I think because I come from a family of a lot of military service in both the Air Force and the Army, and yeah, my husband was former Navy. I really was raised with a sense of serving, and most of my cousins were male. And because I didn't feel like I was up for signing up for the Army, I wanted to serve in some other capacity. And also, I had seen the film Silence of the Lambs, where Jodie
Mhm.
Foster was a female federal agent on the big screen. And it was the first time I had seen a woman agent, uh, in the movies. And I wanted to be her. So
I
I
love it.
started to pursue what that would look like. I wasn't a good fit for all of the crime scene photos that were, tied to what the FBI does. And then when I figured out that Secret Service did white collar crime and more financial crime and protection, that was a much better fit for my personality.
Yeah. Wow. And so how long ago are we talking about this? Because I'm sure it was quite an experience just trying to train and get into this field as well, right?
Yes, well, this was a long time ago. I was, in my early 30s actually when
Wow.
I was 26. I was 26 when I
Okay.
applied.
Yeah.
And yeah, the training was very intense. Most of my classmates had come from a background of military or police. They already knew a lot of control tactics, as they call them, self-defense. I was coming from the corporate world, so I feel like I had a bigger ramp up period in training than a lot of my colleagues who were former Marines and things. But I just every day, I think if I'm honest, I'm really stubborn and I'm fueled when someone tells me I can't do
Mm,
something or I won't be able to make it. That just makes me more determined.
yeah.
And so every day I just had to recommit because there were several times I wanted to quit.
Oh
I
my
would
gosh.
cower in the shower full of bruises. In fact, one time I went to get a massage and the woman was horrified. And I said, no, no, this is not a domestic
Who's
abuse
beating you up?
situation. Yeah, it's me doing this to myself. I've chosen this path. And every time I wanted to quit, I just decided I would quit tomorrow. And then I never let tomorrow come.
I
And I
think.
have to credit a friend of mine who went to West Point with that mindset and that mentality of, just keep moving the carrot. And if
Mm,
it's too hard to get all the way through the day, then you get from breakfast to lunch and from lunch to dinner.
wow. Yeah. So it sounds to me like you went into the corporate world first and then you decided to switch into Secret Service.
Yes, I got
Okay.
into banking, working anti-fraud and anti-money laundering.
Okay.
That is how I got into the Secret Service. When 9/11 happened, they came to our credit card processor, and the Bank of America cards that the hijackers had used were part of our portfolio. So when I
Mm,
sat down with Secret Service to look at the time and date stamps of transactions for them to go get film footage, they said, "Well, we need women, and we need women with credit card experience." And I happened to speak French at the time too, and they said we need people with languages, and it was just kind of one of those. Everything came together at the right moment, and it
wow.
presented
Yeah.
itself to me as an opportunity. And then something in my head just clicked and said,
Mm.
I'm going to go for this.
Yeah, I love it. I think this is such a unique experience. And like I was telling you earlier, I personally don't know anyone else who is in the Secret Service or has ever been in. So this is fascinating for me to just learn about. But I can't help but notice the parallels in the mindset stories, right? Because no matter what your challenge is, or no matter what you're kind of trying to get through, mindset is always a crucial part of it. So you decided that you were going to apply for the Secret Service. You start the training. How long is this process of training? And it's physically intensive training, right?
Yes, it is. Well, and the process before you even get into training is intense. You have um, panel interviews and they do a full physical on you and they go and interview everyone in your immediate trust circle. And, there's a polygraph and that takes months. So you've really got to, it kind of helps you to develop that mindset when you think, oh my gosh, am I going to make the next hurdle? So those initial hurdles, it took about a year from when I filled out the application and took the initial test and got accepted just to even get into the channel to get into
Wow.
training. So, but then training itself, you go down to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. For me, that was in Brunswick, Georgia, for a few months. And then Secret Service has their own training facility up in Maryland. And so you're there for several more months learning protection and, how to identify counterfeit and specific things that are Secret Service related.
So it's not, even though your job was going to be in all of this fraud and identifying counterfeits and all of that, is it, you still have to go through the physical training? That's not something you can bypass.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Every agent carries a weapon, and you've got to be ready to be on the job and
Yeah. In case something
fighting.
happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. So you're in the training and now the physical part of the training, how long is that?
Well, the 3 or 4
3 months.
months that are down at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and then you've got several more months up in Maryland before you go to a field office. Generally, you
Okay.
are assigned to a domestic field office in the United States for the first 3 to 5 years. And I got out of training and I went right to the G8 summit and got to protect Jacques Chirac, the former president of France, which was really
That's
exciting for
cool.
me.
Yeah.
Um, but the hard part, Chitra, was I was so determined to do it. Walking across that stage and the moment I was given my badge was one of my life's best accomplishments, in
Yeah.
my career. And yet I got to the field office and found when we started making arrests for counterfeit and fraud and embezzling and whatever the crime was, I was too sensitive to break up people's families, even though I knew it was on the right side of the law. Breaking up people's families was just too hard for me. And so I ultimately fought so hard to get there and become an agent, and then decided that it wasn't the dream that I had envisioned. And it
Mm.
ultimately wasn't a good fit for me down the road. I was only an agent for about a year and a half. And that's okay. It took a lot of courage to go and turn in my weapon and my badge and go back to the corporate world. I ended up running a fraud department for a gift card company, but I don't regret it. I think
Mm.
it's so important to try.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because we're just trying to kind of grasp our heads around the fact that you, as a petite female, got into the Secret Service after so much struggle, after wanting to quit through the training for so many times and making it through, feeling really good about it, and then realizing, okay, this is not for me. I'm thinking about all these young professionals, young college kids who are now going into college. They're 17, 18. I have a 18-year-old who just started college. So I'm thinking about these kids and they have all this pressure to figure out what it is that they want to do. Right. And you're telling me that you went through this rigorous, intense training, and then a year and a half later, you decided it's not for me and I'm going to move on to something else. So tell me first what you learned about yourself in this process of taking on a challenge that is enormous, going through it, wanting to quit, but not quite quitting, and then finally saying, okay, I don't think this was for me. So can you walk me through like a little bit about how you feel about yourself having been through that? What did you learn
Sure.
through the process? What changed inside of you?
I think I was really proud, to be honest. I was proud of myself that I did it. I walked across the stage, I became an agent. I was good at the white collar crime and good at my investigations. And it just gave me a lot of self confidence that, wow, I defied the odds.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't stay in it and I decided that maybe it wasn't my long term dream, I learned a lot too. It was hard for me after, proving to everyone that I could do it, that actually once I got there, it wasn't a good fit for me. So I think I was a little embarrassed and I felt guilty
Mm,
that I didn't want to stay.
mm,
But ultimately, I knew I had to be true to myself. It started affecting my health. I wasn't eating healthily because I was always, at the airport doing protection and turning around and doing a raid on a house and just days on end eating snacks at 7-Eleven where I could grab them or fast food because I just didn't have time. And so I started realizing too, as I mentioned, I was one of the older ones in training. A lot of, people get straight out of school and go into training. I was in my later 20s.
yeah.
And I think I had the maturity to realize my health is more important. There's no work-life balance here. And I didn't think there would be as an agent, but I thought I could handle it. And
Mm,
I felt at some point like the tides were turning and it was becoming toxic. I was
mm,
running at night and on the weekends out in a vehicle and on surveillance detection and things, and it's when all the criminals are out, but I didn't want it. Just eventually I wanted to have a family. I wasn't seeing my friends, I wasn't seeing people that I loved. I was missing
mm.
weddings and funerals and births and celebrations, and I decided I needed a little more balance. in my
Mm,
life. And so it was really hard. I felt like I was giving up to
yeah.
turn everything in and quit. And yet, looking back, I really applaud myself because I think so many people stay in medical school or law school or even in a bad marriage, right? They're just not willing to be brutally honest with themselves that I'm trying really hard and this is just not working.
Yeah. I think you touched upon two things that I want you to elaborate on. One is you said that you felt guilt and shame about having gone through all of this and then having to then say, I don't want to do this. Was that, do you think that was mostly because of the judgment of people around you and how they might perceive you, the embarrassment that you felt?
I think when you're young, you're just such a people pleaser. At least I was. I was more concerned with what other people thought, like, oh my gosh, will my family be embarrassed that, my whole community ended up rallying around me and then cheering me on. And then I got here and then now I'm leaving. And,
Yeah.
I felt I'm a loyal person and I like to commit to something. So it was almost like breaking a vow in a way. Yeah, I think when I was younger, I was much more concerned with what other
Yeah.
people thought. And
And
I
I
think
think
as you get older, you realize nobody's thinking about it. Nobody's
nobody's
thinking
thinking
and
about
judging.
us.
They're not
Um,
judging you. Yeah, they're
it's
not
so
judging you.
liberating, right? When you have that realization finally. But I think a lot of people
Yeah.
listening or watching will be able to relate to that, right? Because so many people are out there trying to figure it out. And we look to others for feedback, we look to others for validation. And, first you had to get their validation for making this decision and you got judged for that. Then you went through the journey and which was very tough. And then you passed and which I'm sure there's a small percentage of people that get through. I'm sure a lot of people quit along the way, right? So
Yes,
now you're leaving this coveted thing that you worked so hard to get, and now you have judgment around that. So it kind of like also demonstrates for us in your example that people are going to have judgments no matter what, right? Or even if they don't outwardly say it, your worry about their thoughts is always going to be there no matter what, right? So
that's right.
how did you transition from that place of I'm feeling embarrassed and guilty and I don't know if I'm making the right choice to I know this is for me, because I think that in that bridge or that transitional bridge is where the magic happens, right? Um, what changed? What made you convinced that okay, this is not for me and I need to walk out?
I think I just decided that it was more important to have tried. I definitely did a lot of what I would consider now over explaining. I felt like everyone I met who said, "Oh my gosh, you quit? You're leaving?" There was this big long explanation of why and, the reasons. And I was really trying to justify it for other people, but maybe for myself too.
Mm,
But I think very quickly I moved from guilt and shame into, well, no one can take it away from me. I still did it. Even if I didn't do it for a really long time, I still made it. I still
yeah.
defied the odds and I get to hold on to that. And so it wasn't a failure. It was just, I got more information when I got there. And I think, like a lot of experiences, once you're in it, you realize, uh-oh. And it takes a lot of courage to admit that maybe you've made a mistake.
Did you have like role models around you? Did you have somebody who, because if you are a people pleaser and you're switching into someone now who's honoring their own truth and their own authenticity, I almost feel like just like the external world validates things for us, sometimes the inspiration also comes. Was there something you read, someone who taught you spoke to, or was it just the process of justifying it over and over that made you realize, yeah, I'm right?
I think there's a mixture of those. I've always been a big reader. I love, self-improvement and positivity books and those sorts of things. So I'm sure some of that was leaving an impression on my subconscious, but I am really fortunate that I grew up in a community of really strong, wonderful women,
Mm,
especially my mother, who always encouraged me to be independent, to find my voice. And I went to an all women's college and I have great women friends that, they're the type of women that you want in your community who just cheer you on unconditionally. And I
mm.
was really fortunate to have that, which helped. facilitate the transition out of law enforcement and back into the corporate world.
Mm, amazing. Yeah. Community is so powerful. And, especially I think when you are able to share your vulnerability in a community and have people who can cheer you on no matter what, it gives you the empowerment that you need to then make those choices in alignment with how you feel, right? And how you think.
Yes.
So I'm glad you touched upon that as well. I'm a big proponent of communities, and we met in a similar community that is very empowering as well. And so, tell us a little bit about how how do you show up now in your work? You've got all this amazing experience. You've made so many amazing mindset transitions. Do you feel like you are now in full alignment with the work that you're doing? And what is it that you do right now?
That's a great question. I don't know. Do any of us always feel fully in alignment? I feel much more in
Okay,
alignment. I think I'm
fair.
always striving to find steps that I can take and experiences I can have that, yes, feel really authentic, feel really true to my desires. But I definitely fall off that horse and end up doing things, maybe volunteering for something I don't want to, or saying yes when I don't want to, which I really, when I go out and I speak to women, especially in schools or high schools or college level, one thing I always say is really try never to make someone else more comfortable at the expense of yourself. That's
Mm,
martyring yourself. And setting boundaries and saying no is a form of self respect.
yeah.
And as I've gotten older, that part has definitely become easier. And that has guided me to stay on a much more aligned path.
Yeah, so important, right? And especially when most of us, I know I can speak for myself, we come from this background of, martyrdom is praised and applauded and validated every single day. Like my mom, that's what we were taught. It was like, give until you can't give no more. And it took so much unlearning for me to let go of that, right? We were all taught to be good girls, behave, don't make, don't ruffle any feathers, don't speak up when you don't have to. So I think that it's so amazing that you made that transition and now you're speaking to young women and teaching them this stuff, which I think we can never hear it enough, right? Because our mind makes up all these amazing stories to convince us that we need to do the things that we think we need to do and not set boundaries and not speak up. But are you seeing a change in the young women now? Do you feel like they are coming in more ready to set boundaries, or do you feel like they have the same struggles?
A little of both. I think, it can be generational. Like my mother's
Mm,
generation, they are true steel magnolias. Those women, they don't air their dirty laundry. Everything is fine, fine, fine. And they just handle it, handle it, handle it, even if they're falling apart inside.
yeah.
And I'd like to say that the younger generations are a little more self-evolved. They don't believe in treating yourself like a Sherpa and pushing yourself to burn out. I think there's a lot more awareness for women in general about how important self care is, and that continually sacrificing for everyone else without factoring yourself into the equation is not a great approach.
Yeah, for sure. Because I hear stories of girls in middle school, and I feel like, why are they still struggling with all of this? The cattiness, the popularity contest. Like, why is that even a thing still? I have two boys, and I see the difference in, when they're talking about their experiences, and I'm like, there's still this huge divide, and it never makes sense to me. I'm like, why aren't we raising our girls to be like more mentally stronger and confident and enable that warrior inside of them sooner? But for some reason, I feel like it's still going on. So I don't know. Do you have any
Oh,
thoughts around how we can make some changes? What do we need to do maybe at home differently?
definitely. I think, media has gotten better. I don't think they're photoshopping the models to look completely emaciated, like they did in the 80s. So we've made some progress there, but it is impossible with Instagram and Facebook and social media. Nobody puts the pictures, up of when they've had a horrible day and they look their worst. There's still this ideal of perfectionism that's out there for women and the emphasis on, beauty and designer clothing and, the latest fads. I think part of that is just being a teenager. But,
Mm,
being able to go in and say to young women, fine, of course you want to look your best, but try to do it for you and don't do it
mm,
because you're in competition with the woman in front of you or next to you. There is room for all of us to shine. And because someone else is shining doesn't dim your light. So
yes.
the education around stop being so catty. These are women that you're going to need in the future in your network, in your communities. These are people that when you fall down, they are going to lift you up. So yeah, I wish young girls would stop being so mean to each other. But some of that is just nature, I think. They're just exploring their identities, they're lost, they don't know who they are, they're pushing boundaries and barriers. And it's just important to put those gentle reminders out there that there's room for all of us to shine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's starting to happen, like you said, but it's still a smaller percentage of women or anyone in general where we have that abundance mindset of like, okay, there's enough for all of us. And there
Yeah.
truly is. And really, what the world needs is for all of us to be authentic. So tell me if somebody's listening right now and they're feeling like they have this big dream that they want to pursue. And, there's a lot of pressure to first, at a young age, figure out what you want to do. And then to make sure that you do it well and then you have a successful career doing it. Right. So, one of the things that you touched upon, and I don't know if this was before we were talking, before the recording or after, but you said something about regret, right? And you're glad you did this, even though you didn't continue the Secret Service job. So, um, do you think that, because, sometimes when kids are at that 18, 19-year-old age, trying to figure out what college to go to, what career path to choose, there's a lot of work that goes into it, right? And as parents, we are trying our best to make sure that they take the least painful route to get to where they need to get to, right? And that adds another level of pressure on the kids. So, what would you say to someone, let's say a teen, 17, 18-year-old who is trying to figure out their career path and is not 100% sure, but is about 80% sure that this is what they want to do? And they go for it. Or do they plan B, plan C, and then go for it? Like, what would you advise somebody in that state right now?
Mainly to stick with whatever lights them up, even
Mhm.
if it's not the popular decision. If they want to go be a ballet dancer in New York, no, it's probably not going to garner a lot of money. And no, not a lot of women end up or men becoming professional ballerinas in New York and get to be on stage, but let them try. I think as parents, we have a responsibility to allow our children to pursue things and explore and fail because that teaches them things too. And to the kids in high school and college who feel like they've got to figure it all out, you won't just pursue everything and make sure that the dream you're following is your dream, not someone else's dream. I think even in this day and age, there's still a lot of familiar pressure. Maybe the dad's a doctor or they have a landscaping business they want to pass on to their child. And there's some pressure sometimes from the families,
Uh,
on the children. And I think it's so important just to remember that they're their own personalities, they're individuals, and they need to have the opportunity to choose for themselves.
yeah. I mean, I feel like culturally speaking, for me, it was a tough, tough decision to have my kids follow their dreams because it's always, culturally for us from India, everybody's like, play it safe, get the safe career going first, make sure you have the lifestyle that you want, that you make sure you can afford the lifestyle that you want. And so, there was a time where I was always like, should I push them towards something more safe? Should I let them pursue their dream? And something inside of me, thankfully, after doing all of this mindset work, is like, no, let them follow their dream. Let them follow their dream. And we're here to back them up if they need it. But there are so many people I know that have played it safe. What do you think is the cost of playing it safe?
Sometimes your relationship. with your kid,
Mm,
right? They may resent you if they weren't able to go and try. And I know this is like a double-edged sword because, sometimes you can't afford as a parent for your child to go off and, buy a bunch of YouTube equipment. Maybe they want to be the next Mr. Beast, or, can you tell I have a 13-year-old, Mom, I want to be a YouTuber. Okay, well, you know, we can try that. We can, if you can earn money, we can buy the equipment slowly, but it's hard to, like, I hear myself also saying to him, like, I think you'd be great. You have a good personality for it. You're, really great at photography. They're drawing out all the talents. But then on the other side in the background, I'm saying, but you're so good at engineering. You're so, you have such a strong talent for spatial
yeah.
relationships and building. And it's hard, but what I wouldn't want is for him to get into some sort of a professional track where he's miserable. And I think that the ramifications of that would be it would hurt our relationship. And then I would feel guilty. I think ultimately as a parent, you want your children to be happy. And a lot of that I know is that means they need to have money in order to have a successful life. I don't mean loads of it. I just mean enough to pay the bills and get groceries and, live independently, hopefully. And it's hard because when you see them going down a path where you think, oh my gosh, are they going to eat ramen noodles for the next 20 years? It's really hard not to speak your mind, but I think there's a balance in there.
I think you touched upon something very important, which is that you want your child to be happy, right? For me personally, that was the turning point when I kind of gave into it full throttle, like, okay, follow your dreams, because I'd rather have a happy child than a miserable engineer, right? Or doctor or lawyer or whatever. And so I think also what you said about, the relationship, right? And one of the things that I have learned over time is that we are not here to put our kids into this mold of success that society has created for us, right? We are here to support them in their path, whatever that might be. And we are here to, of course, guide them and, of course, make them see the pros and cons of the choices that they make. But at the same time, our role is not to design the path for them. Our role is just to guide them along, right? Just like you would run a marathon and you have the cheerleaders on the side, they're not going to come and educate you on how to run. That happens in the training. They're just here to cheerlead you along the way, right?
That's
So
right.
I love this conversation, and we could keep going forever. But in the interest of time, I want to ask you a little bit about where people can find you, how they can connect with you, and thank you so much for all the wisdom that you've shared and all the ways that you've opened up our mindset today. And I hope that everyone listening will leave with something inspirational from your story, and live out their dreams to the best of their desires.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah,
I hope women will show up for themselves,
yeah,
whatever that looks like.
I love
But
it.
I can be found on LinkedIn at
Yeah,
Tracy K. McDonald, and on there is my website where I have a blog about our life in the Foreign Service and do some personal writing that people can connect with me with. And just thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you and your listeners today on the Warrior Mindset.
I love it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to sharing this with everybody. And we will obviously include all of your links in the show notes. And I can't wait to continue this conversation offline. Thank you.
Thank you.